I had just hugged my son and daughter-in-law goodbye at the airport for their honeymoon, a $50,000 envelope of cash in their hands, when my family housekeeper of 10 years sent me 3 blood-chilling words: "Don't go home." Right after that came a command that froze every drop of blood in my veins: "Check the cameras now." I quickly pulled my Bentley over onto the shoulder of the Long Island Expressway, turning on the hazard lights beneath a gray New York sky brewing a storm. When I opened the surveillance app connected to the hidden cameras in my private study at the Hamptons estate, what I witnessed made my heart stop, then hammer with a cold fury I hadn't felt since my days dominating Wall Street. My son Bradley and his wife Monica were supposed to be on a flight to the Maldives. Yet on the screen they were right there in my private study. Monica was holding a priceless bottle of 1982 Petrus wine I had saved for my 70th birthday, not just drinking it, but intentionally pouring the ruby-red liquid onto my expensive Persian rug, cackling wildly. Meanwhile, Bradley had his feet kicked up on my mahogany desk, wearing a smirk of pure disdain. Monica raised her glass to toast, having doubled the dose of arsenic in my morning herbal tea, confident that if I drank it for just 3 more days, given my heart condition, the doctor would rule it a natural death from heart failure. Then they would swallow my $50 million estate whole and sell the mansion to buy Ferraris. Hello everyone. I am incredibly grateful you are spending your time here with me today. Before we get started, and I tell you how an old shark calmly dismantled their lives piece by piece right in front of them, without them ever knowing, I'd love to know what city or country you're watching from. Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to ruthlessly cut a toxic person out of your life to protect yourself. Please note, this is a fictionalized story with dramatized elements that carries a profound philosophy about family, trust, and the boundaries of self-preservation. Now, let's dive into the details. At 69 years old, I thought the fiercest battles of my life were behind me, left on the chaotic trading floors of Wall Street. 40 years navigating the hedge fund world had forged me a spine of steel and an instinct for smelling danger from a mile away. But as I entered my twilight years, I willingly shed that armor. I just wanted to be a normal father, a generous man enjoying peaceful days in my massive seaside estate in the Hamptons. I believed family was the one fortress that would never betray you. I was wrong, a mistake that almost cost me my life. My hands, which used to be steady enough to maneuver billions of dollars and shake global financial markets, were now trembling on the steering wheel of my Bentley. My heart was pounding relentlessly in my chest. Outside the window, traffic on the expressway sped by under the gloomy, cloud-covered New York sky, but inside this soundproof cabin, all I felt was a dead silence. The silence of a scheduled death, orchestrated by the very people I loved most. Just 40 minutes prior, at Terminal 4 of JFK International Airport, I had embraced my only son. Bradley was 32, the only flesh and blood left between me and Elizabeth, my late wife who passed away from a severe illness over a decade ago. I patted him on the back, smiled, and slipped a thick envelope containing $50,000 in cash into his hand. I told him it was pocket money for emergencies, that he and Monica, his bride of 6 months, should enjoy the most lavish honeymoon possible in the Maldives. I stood there, watching them walk hand in hand through security, waving goodbye, playing the role of the generous old patriarch. However, the cruel truth was laid bare with a single text from Rosa. Rosa is a Mexican woman who had been our housekeeper and cook for 10 years. She wasn't just an employee. I had long considered her a part of this house, a silent, devoted woman. The 3 words, "Don't go home," flashing on my phone screen left me stunned. Before I could process it, a second text hit me like a bucket of ice water. "Check the cameras now." I immediately pulled over, flipped on the hazard lights, and opened the smart home app on my phone. When I bought the Hamptons estate in the late 1980s from a tycoon suffering from Cold War paranoia, I personally set up an independent server running on a completely isolated private network. I also secretly installed microcameras, hidden inside the spines of books and paintings in my private study, a sanctuary no one was allowed to enter casually. It was a contingency from my finance days that I never thought I'd actually have to use. When the high-definition video loaded on my screen, the scene before me made regret and agony squeeze my throat tight. In my luxurious mahogany-paneled study, The couple who was supposed to be flying over the Atlantic was standing right there in plain sight. Monica was wearing a white silk robe, holding the legendary bottle of 1982 Petrus. It was an extremely rare vintage I had carefully kept in the cellar for 20 years, promising myself I would only pop the cork on my 70th birthday with my children. But Monica wasn't just drinking that precious wine. She held the bottle high, tilting her hand to pour a steady stream of the silky ruby liquid onto the antique hand-woven Persian rug, leaving a dark red stain like blood. She laughed, a shrill, piercing cackle that blasted through my phone speaker when I cranked the volume up. Sitting right next to her was Bradley. He was leaning back in my favorite buffalo leather chair, his loafers resting squarely on my antique mahogany desk, tapping the toe of his shoe and spinning the brass globe in the corner. His face was twisted into a smirk of sheer arrogance and cruelty. "Are you sure the old man is gone for good?" Bradley's voice came through the audio feed loud and clear, so cold it sent a shiver down my spine. Monica let out a sharp laugh that tore at my eardrums like shattered glass. "Of course he's gone. The blind old fool thinks we're in the air. By the time he's dragging his feet back from his stupid little drive, we'll have hired a driller to crack open that safe behind the painting." She stepped closer to the desk, holding up the Petrus crystal glass sparkling under the chandelier, raising it as if toasting a spectacular victory, and uttered the words that made every ounce of life inside me come to a grinding halt. "Now let's toast to a miraculous cup of organic herbal tea." She took a sip of wine, then smirked at Bradley with sick pride. "This morning, I snuck in a double dose of arsenic into the old man's teapot. Your dear Dr. Thorne confirmed it. With his high blood pressure and cardiac history, plus the effect of the digoxin heart meds I crushed in there, everything will play out perfectly. Just 3 more days, Bradley. Exactly 3 days of him drinking that tea, and his heart will stop completely. Then, the official medical conclusion will be a natural death by myocardial infarction in the elderly. No one will suspect a thing, and the $50 million family trust will be ours." Bradley cheered with glee, clinking his crystal glass hard against his wife's. $50 million clean dollars without a dime of estate tax. "As soon as the old man's funeral is over, I'll order the real estate guys to liquidate this stuffy old mansion. We'll buy that glass beachfront villa in Malibu, get 2 bright red Ferraris, and that 30-meter yacht you've always wanted." The old man spent his whole life hoarding cash, living like a senile old turtle. It's time that money was used to actually enjoy life. Every word, every syllable fired into my eardrums like bullets, shattering the last shred of paternal love I had left. I had raised Bradley since he was a baby, stayed up countless nights in the hospital when he ran a high fever, sent him to the most elite private schools in America, and patiently paid off his debts when he blew his money on impulsive business ventures. I had accepted Monica without demanding a prenuptial agreement, simply because I wanted my son to feel respected and entirely loved. And in return for 40 years of unconditional sacrifice, I was handed an herbal tea laced with arsenic and digoxin, along with a 3-day schedule to send me to my grave so they could buy supercars. I leaned my head back against the leather seat of the Bentley and closed my eyes. For exactly 20 seconds, I allowed myself to be an agonized, heartbroken old father, devastated enough to want to collapse right on the steering wheel. But the second the 19th tick ended, a sharp crack echoed in my head, the familiar sound of emotional detachment. When I opened my eyes, there were no tears or weakness left in Garrison Ford's gaze. The hurt had evaporated entirely, leaving behind a layer of eternal permafrost. I pulled into a small, run-down private emergency clinic in a working-class neighborhood in Queens, a remote place where no one would recognize the face or name of Garrison Ford. I strode inside. The front desk reeked of bleach mixed with rubbing alcohol. I used cash and gave a completely fake name, Arthur Pendleton. I demanded the medical staff draw my blood and run the most comprehensive toxicology panel possible immediately. While waiting for the preliminary results, I walked over to the convenience store across the street and used cash to buy a burner phone along with a few prepaid cards. My hands were no longer shaking. With every passing minute, my fury condensed into cold, calculated equations. A plan for retaliation was slowly taking shape in my mind, layer by layer, immensely complex and utterly lethal. I turned on the new phone and typed out a single text message, to the only person in the Hamptons estate who had risked her life to warn me. I texted Rosa simply, "I am safe, act completely normal, absolutely do not let them know you texted me. I am monitoring everything remotely." When I returned to the clinic an hour later, the night shift doctor, a middle-aged Eastern European man, with dark bags under his eyes, came out and called my fake name with an incredibly tense expression. He led me into a private exam room, firmly shut the door, and locked the deadbolt. "Mr. Pendleton," the doctor said, his voice trembling as he tapped his finger on the lab report. "I need to ask you honestly, do you work in a chemical plant? Or do you have a personal vendetta against anyone?" I shook my head, replying calmly, "No, I am retired." "Is there something wrong with my blood?" The doctor placed the rapid test report on the table, pointing to the alarming red numbers. "I don't know how you absorbed them, but the concentration of arsenic in your blood is currently 20 times the permissible limit for the human body. Not only that, but we also found traces of digoxin, extremely potent derivative extracted from the foxglove plant, typically used to treat severe heart failure, even though your blood pressure indicates you absolutely do not need it." He took off his glasses, rubbing his forehead in deep concern. "The combination of arsenic and digoxin is highly lethal. Arsenic slowly erodes the blood vessel walls and damages the heart muscle day by day, while an improper dose of digoxin will trigger acute cardiac arrhythmia. This is not accidental poisoning, sir. Someone is deliberately trying to induce a perfect heart attack to kill you without leaving any suspicion. You need to be admitted to a major medical center immediately for emergency dialysis." I looked the doctor dead in the eye and said firmly, "I fully understand my condition, doctor, and I will handle this matter myself. I need you to write me a prescription for the highest dosage of heavy metal chelation therapy medication approved for outpatient use to help bind and excrete the arsenic from my circulatory system." The doctor hesitated, about to refuse because medical protocol dictated he report a suspected poisoning to the police. But when I pulled a thick stack of $100 bills from my coat pocket and placed it on the desk, his eyes froze. The cash was enough to cover 10 times the cost of the medical visit and guarantee his absolute silence. He quietly sighed, signed the prescription for the specialized treatment, and handed me a high-dose bottle of medication, straight from the clinic's emergency cabinet. I drove straight into the heart of Manhattan, pulling up to the luxurious Pierre Hotel, situated on Fifth Avenue, right on the edge of Central Park. I didn't use the main lobby, opting instead for the private VIP entrance. I used the emergency cash from the safe in my trunk to rent the entire penthouse suite on the 39th floor, registering it under a shell company I had kept frozen for 20 years. The massive penthouse was flooded with the sunset, casting its glow over New York City. I stood on the windy balcony, gazing down at the skyscrapers that used to be my old playground. Immediately, I opened my laptop and connected via a secure port to the smart home server in the Hamptons. On the screen was crystal clear footage from the estate's living room. Bradley was sitting with his feet kicked up on the sofa, holding my expensive primary cell phone that he had snuck out of my bedroom. He was on a call with the bank teller, managing my personal stock investment account. "Yes, it's me, Garrison." Bradley's voice echoed through the computer speakers, deep, slow, perfectly mirroring my cadence. "I need you to confirm and authorize an expedited wire transfer of $200,000 to my offshore investment advisory account this afternoon." I gritted my teeth. The boy was acting too well. A terrifying imitation that proved he had been secretly practicing his father's voice in the mirror for months. Sitting next to him, Monica was frantically digging through my personal filing cabinet. She pulled out my living will and emergency medical care directives legally drafted 6 years ago, which explicitly stated that all medical decisions and assets would be strictly overseen by a board of attorneys if I became incapacitated. Monica disdainfully ripped that crucial document apart and shoved it straight into the paper shredder. She turned to Bradley. "We need to draft a new, comprehensive power of attorney tonight. Forge the old man's signature and backdate it to last week. When he takes his last breath, I want us holding everything. The Hamptons estate, the stock portfolio, the classic car collection, and the $1 million wine cellar. I will not let a single dime fall into the hands of some stupid charities." I sat watching their every move to destroy my legacy, but a cold smirk slowly crept onto my lips. They were too greedy. They were too impatient, and it was exactly this impatience to snatch everything at breakneck speed that was exposing fatal flaws. I picked up the burner phone and dialed Leonard Katz, my supreme legal counsel, my old comrade, who had fought alongside me in hostile takeovers on Wall Street since the 80s. In the New York legal world, they called Leonard the swamp crocodile, because once his legal jaws locked onto prey, he would crush it until not a single bone fragment was left. The phone rang exactly twice before Leonard picked up. His voice sounded surprised. "Garrison? Is that really you? I thought you were enjoying your golden years on a Hamptons beach." "The golden years are over," Leonard said, my voice flat and sharp as a razor blade. "I am speaking to you from a secure line. My health is under threat, and my assets are being pillaged by my own family." Leonard went silent for 2 seconds, recognizing the gravity in my tone. He asked in a low voice, "Who are we suing into the ground?" I looked up at the computer screen, where my own flesh and blood shoved his hands in his pockets, while gleefully admiring the empty bottle of Petrus on my desk. I spoke each word clearly into the phone. "We aren't suing anyone, Leonard. We are going hunting. I want you at the penthouse of the Pierre Hotel in exactly 1 hour. Bring the red files and summon your most trusted forensic accounting team here, immediately." I hung up and poured myself a glass of filtered water from the penthouse bar. I took out 2 pills from the bottle the doctor in Queens had given me, tossed them into my mouth, and swallowed them down to begin purging the toxic heavy metals clinging to my blood vessels. I sat down at the tempered glass desk, opening a blank text document on my laptop. I typed a massive headline at the top of the page: Operation Ghost Flight. Step 1, uncovering the truth and gathering preliminary medical evidence, was complete. Step 2, setting the bait, started right this second. I needed to give them exactly what they were lusting after the most. I needed to fake my death, or at least pretend that I was deteriorating at an astonishing speed, becoming a senile, helpless old man waiting for the Grim Reaper's scythe. If they wanted to see an incapacitated victim, unable to defend himself, I would give them the performance of a lifetime. I would let them forge my signature themselves, let them transfer money through dummy transaction portals. I would patiently sit back and watch them dig their own grave so deep that when the trap finally snapped shut, they would never see the light of freedom again. I drove back eastward as the night blanketed all of Long Island. The storm predicted that afternoon had now begun pouring heavy rain. I hid my car in a dense oak grove about a mile from the main gates of the Hamptons estate, on an old service road few noticed. My chest still occasionally throbbed with a tingling pain, the remnants of the arsenic still circulating in my capillaries, but the first dose of the detox medication was starting to show clear effects. The brain fog vanished completely, returning my mind to its sharp, cold clarity. I stepped out of the car, pulling the collar of my waterproof trench coat high to cover half my face, and trudged through the muddy sludge under the torrential downpour. I knew every tree root, every rock on my 10-acre property by heart. I headed straight for the faux antique granite structure tucked away in the deepest corner of the western garden. To guests visiting the estate, it was just a romantic decorative folly in the style of 19th-century European architecture. But to me, it was the entrance to the Cold War underground fortress the previous owner had spent millions to build. I brushed aside the soaked ivy covering the stone slab beneath the tower, revealing a waterproof metal keypad. I quickly typed the 6-digit code, the birthday of Elizabeth, my late wife. A faint beep sounded, accompanied by the soft hiss of hydraulic bolts, and the 100-pound stone slab slowly slid open, exposing a narrow reinforced concrete tunnel plunging deep underground. I stepped inside, pulled the heavy stone door shut behind me, and clicked on a small pen-sized flashlight, piercing a thin beam of light through the thick darkness. I carefully walked along the 200-meter tunnel, leading straight to the emergency safe room, located deep, directly behind the wall of my master's study in the mansion. When I reached the heavily fortified lead-lined steel door at the end of the tunnel, I entered my code a second time. The door slid open without a single sound. I slipped inside and locked the mechanical deadbolts to ensure no one from inside the mansion could ever open this room. The safe room remained exactly as it was, with 40-centimeter thick steel-reinforced concrete walls, a pantry of dry rations, automatic oxygen tanks, and a central surveillance rig hooked directly into every hidden camera placed throughout the estate. The front wall of this room backed right up against the oak bookcase in my study. In the exact center was a large one-way mirror disguised behind rows of books, allowing anyone standing in the safe room to see right through into the study if they slid a wooden partition aside. I turned on the audio feed and pressed my ear to the steel wall. Outside the study, just 20 inches away from me, the sound of things being ransacked echoed constantly like rats digging through trash. I discreetly pulled the mechanical latch to slide the wooden partition open an inch, peering through the one-way glass. Monica was standing in front of my fireproof metal filing cabinet, holding my $10 million life insurance policy. She scoffed, pointing at the beneficiary clause, and smirked disdainfully at Bradley, who was sitting on the sofa drinking wine. "Look at this. Your great man left the entire $10 million in life insurance to the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. He didn't leave you a single dime. What a father with a heart of gold of the century." With that, Monica ruthlessly ripped handfuls of pages from the life insurance binder, casually tossing them straight into the roaring fire in the fireplace. I watched each page singe yellow, curl up, and turn into black ash drowned in the sea of flames. The words written to save the lives of children with cancer were incinerated by her in the blink of an eye to satisfy her bottomless greed. She wasn't just stealing my money, she was robbing the lives of innocent souls. Bradley tossed a fountain pen onto the desk, sighing and stretching. "This comprehensive power of attorney has to be absolutely perfect, Monica. If we use it to drain the investment accounts before the probate court gets involved, all it takes is one suspicious teller flagging the board, and we lose everything." Monica walked behind his chair, sliding her hands to massage her husband's shoulders, and whispered seductively into his ear, "No one is going to suspect a thing, darling. Dr. Thorne has officially updated his medical records regarding the old man's hand tremors and brain fog. We have fully legal medical evidence proving a dutiful son had to step up and manage the estate on behalf of his incapacitated father. Everything is watertight to the last detail." I sat in the darkness of the underground safe room, my hands clenched into fists so tight, my fingernails dug deep enough to draw blood from my palms. There was no fear or heartache left. All that remained was absolute disgust and an uncompromising resolve for total annihilation. I pulled a small notepad from my pocket, meticulously recording the exact dates, times, names of every destroyed document, and every self-incriminating confession, echoing through the surveillance feed. This was their death warrant for federal court. I turned off the monitors, locked the safe room door tight, and backed out into the underground tunnel. I had every piece of information I needed regarding their intent, methods, and the 3-day timeline they had set for my death. Tonight was the night I built the trap, and tomorrow, when dawn broke, I would personally light the fuse that would bury all their illusions. When I returned to the penthouse at the Pierre Hotel, just as the sky was turning pale, Leonard Katz and his 2 top-tier forensic accountants had been working non-stop for hours. The room smelled of thick black coffee and neatly sorted stacks of legal files. "All legal asset restructuring procedures are complete, Garrison." Leonard took off his glasses, rubbing his exhausted eyes that still gleamed with a terrifying sharpness. "We have secretly transferred ownership of all commercial real estate, stock portfolios, and liquid assets to the Irrevocable Charitable Trust under the name of St. Jude. This decision took effect immediately as of 3 o'clock this morning, though we are intentionally delaying the public update on the New York State Property Record System from reflecting this for the next 48 hours. Leonard pointed at the accountant's computer screen. "Simultaneously, we have successfully activated the shadow mirroring interface on your online banking portal. When Bradley uses the stolen password to log into the main account, he will see exactly the number he expects, a glittering balance of $50 million. He can freely execute wire transfers, trade stocks, or withdraw funds. But it's all just a simulated environment, an isolated sandbox completely disconnected from real money flows. Every single click he makes is just sending data straight to our forensic tracking server." "Excellent," I nodded, taking a sip of throat-soothing warm water. "And what about the honeypot account in the Cayman Islands?" Leonard flashed the half-smirk of an old crocodile, catching the scent of blood. The $80 million Cayman Black account remains fully active in the real environment, exactly as you requested. As you know, that is the shadow account you collaborated with the FBI and the IRS to set up 5 years ago in a sting operation to catch your embezzling ex-partner. That account is still under Tier 1 real-time surveillance by the U.S. Treasury Department's anti-money laundering alert system. Any capital moving in or out of that account without federal security clearance will instantly trip the red alarms at FBI headquarters in Quantico. I sat down at the desk, opened my personal laptop and said, "Now it's time we toss the bait for the prey to smell." I knew my son's nature all too well. Bradley was lazy and arrogant, but he carried a heavy dose of paranoia. He always believed I was hiding a massive treasure somewhere behind his back, because he himself was a person who lived in deceit. Over the past 6 months, Monica and Bradley had secretly checked every email, every browser history of mine, searching for info on secret accounts. Today, I was going to show them the exact thing they were going crazy for. I knew exactly where my old tablet was currently sitting on the small coffee table, next to my reading chair in the library at the Hamptons estate, exactly where I left it every day. Monica would undoubtedly go in there to check it in the morning. I opened the email client on my laptop in Manhattan, clicked to compose a new message. I slowly typed out the body of the email in the frantic tone of an old man, terrified by his rapidly failing health, desperate about his secret fortune. "Dear Jean-Luc, I need you to prepare the paperwork to shift the entire $80 million from the Cayman Black account immediately. My health is collapsing far faster than I anticipated. The heart attacks are becoming more frequent. If anything terrible happens to me, I absolutely do not want this massive sum going through the U.S. probate court process. The estate taxes would be a devastating disaster. More importantly, I do not want my son, Bradley, having access to or even knowing about this unsupervised pool of free capital. The boy is immature and will blow all this money on gambling and a depraved lifestyle. Please prepare the wire transfer instructions to the shell company in Panama right away. I will send you the final security authentication codes tomorrow morning." I double-checked every word in the email. $80 million. That was a number big enough to blind any greedy fool, big enough to buy private islands, private jets, and ultimate power. I didn't hit send because doing so would create a transmission history. Instead, I clicked Save to Drafts. The magic of cloud synchronization kicked in immediately. The second I saved that draft on the computer in the Manhattan penthouse, it auto-synced and appeared perfectly intact in the drafts folder on the old tablet sitting quietly in the library in the Hamptons. It was a digital landmine armed and ready, just waiting for the footsteps of those greedy rats to step on it. At exactly 8:15 a.m., as the brilliant sunlight after the storm began piercing through the massive glass windows of the Hamptons estate, I pulled up the surveillance feed from the library. Monica walked into the room wearing a bright red silk nightgown, holding a fragrant cup of coffee. She strolled in humming a cheerful tune, the radiant face of a woman who believed she was about to become a millionaire widow. I leaned forward in my chair in Manhattan. She placed her coffee cup down on the antique wooden table without bothering to use a coaster, leaving a yellowing water ring. She glanced around the room to make sure no one was there, then pressed the home button on the tablet. She expertly punched in the passcode. Of course she knew it, because Bradley had extracted it from me years ago. She opened the email app, swiped down to refresh the inbox. Nothing special, just a few financial newsletters and ads. She was about to toss the tablet back onto the chair when her finger stopped. Her eyes locked onto the notification badge next to the drafts folder. She tapped it. Through the reflection from the mirror behind her, I witnessed the rapid transformation in Monica's posture. Her spine went rigid, her eyes widened to their absolute limits, her pupils dilating in sheer terror and ultimate ecstasy. She read the draft email 3 times over. Cayman, $80 million, not safe, son immature. Shift to Panama. She gasped for air, clutching the tablet with both hands like hugging a solid gold brick that had just fallen from the sky. She whipped around and sprinted out of the library, dashing straight up to the 2nd floor. Just 5 minutes later, Bradley and Monica burst through the doors into the master study. Bradley's hair was still a messy bedhead, but his eyes were blazing with a manic, ravenous hunger. Monica slammed the tablet down on the desk, pointing at the screen and screeching, "Look at it! I told you. That old man always looked down on you, always thought you were a useless freeloader. He has a massive $80 million slush fund hidden off the coast of Cayman, and he's planning to launder it all to Panama before he dies, so you don't get a single dime." Bradley snatched the tablet, his eyes scanning every word like a starving beast pouncing on prey. His face turned beet red, veins popping on his forehead from rage and jealousy. That bastard. $80 million in cash, with zero court oversight. No wonder he spent his whole life lecturing me about saving and being independent. "Monica, we cannot let this money fall into the hands of some Swiss banker or fly off to Panama. We have to take it right now." "But how?" Monica paced frantically around the room, wringing her hands. "He clearly stated in the letter that he's not sending the final security code to this Jean-Luc guy until tomorrow morning. We don't have the master account code in Cayman. If we wire it wrong or touch the account without the code, the Swiss bank will lock down the entire system instantly." Bradley turned toward the bookshelf behind him, the exact spot he had stood pouring the Petrus wine just last night. He walked straight up to a concealed cabinet locked by a mechanical combination dial, where I usually kept old family keepsakes. "I know the code to this safe," Bradley said in a rush, spinning the dial. 54. 1298, the date of his and my mom's wedding. A dry clack echoed, the steel door slid open. Inside the cabinet, right next to old family photo albums, lay a deep red leather-bound notebook with a classic brass clasp. I smirked through the surveillance monitor at the Pierre. The fish had bitten exactly onto the bait I had so patiently laid out. Bradley yanked the leather notebook out, frantically flipping through the pages. The red notebook contained old financial notes from the 90s, calculation formulas, and business project ID codes I had deliberately left there. Right on the very last page, written in my familiar blue ink handwriting, was the bold heading, "Cayman Black Account, Emergency Honeypot." Below that heading was a 12-digit bank identification sequence, an internal online access portal, and a tiny note, "Dual authentication password." Bradley's first pet dog's name combined with his 18th birthday. "Got it," Bradley yelled, thrusting the notebook into the air like an explorer who had just found buried treasure. I knew he could never remember those long, dragging passwords from those international banks. He always wrote them down in this secret red notebook. My first dog's name was Buster, plus December 10th, 98. "We have the login code." Monica jumped up, throwing her arms around her husband's neck and kissing him repeatedly, exactly like a couple who had just hit the federal lottery jackpot. "Transfer the money. Do it right now before the old man in the hotel wakes up and emails the Swiss guy. Wire the whole $80 million to our offshore account. To our shell company account in Nevis." Monica hissed through her teeth. "The account I opened to receive those kickbacks. Nevis is a jurisdiction with no extradition treaty with the U.S. Money goes in there and vanishes forever without a trace. Do it now, Bradley, before the old man in the hotel wakes up and deletes the draft." Bradley hesitated for a tenth of a second. His index finger hovered right over the enter key. "Monica, this is federal wire fraud. If we get caught." Monica raised her hand and slapped Bradley hard on the back of his neck, screaming right into her husband's ear, "Who's going to catch us? The old man is dying. By the time anyone at the bank or some lawyer realizes this money was withdrawn, he'll be 6 feet under, and we'll be sunbathing on a beach in a country with no extradition laws. Do you want to be a millionaire with 80 million? Or do you want to be a coward, scraping by on a few grand of pocket change?" His wife's greed and vicious taunts wiped away the last shred of reason and fear in Bradley's head. He collapsed into the chair, flipped open his personal laptop, and accessed the internal banking link written in the red notebook. He quickly typed the 12-digit account number and entered the password, Buster10121998. But when Bradley clicked the button to proceed with the wire transfer to Nevis, the banking interface suddenly popped up a second-layer security request. "Please enter secondary password or biometric passcode." Bradley let out a massive curse, slamming his fist on the desk. He tried my birthday, his birthday, our first home address, Monica's name. The screen immediately flashed red, signaling invalid password. Attempts remaining. Damn it, there's a second layer of security. Bradley tore at his hair, sweat pouring down his forehead. If I enter it wrong one more time, this Cayman account will lock down automatically and send an emergency alert to Dad's phone. I leaned back against my leather chair in the penthouse, taking a small sip of warm water. Everything was playing out down to the exact millisecond, according to the script I had programmed. I knew exactly what they would do next. Bradley pulled out his personal phone. He opened a spyware app he had secretly installed on my phone 3 months ago, disguised as a weather forecasting app. He thought he was an absolute genius, assuming I had no idea he was still eavesdropping on all my calls, tracking my GPS and reading my texts. That was exactly how they knew where I went for medical checkups or lawyer meetings over the past half year. I had never uninstalled that spyware. I kept it for this exact once-in-a-lifetime moment. I needed a direct information pipeline straight into their ears, a channel transmitting fabricated disinformation that they would believe with absolute certainty because they thought they were stealthily stealing it. I picked up the burner phone and dialed straight into the voicemail of my primary personal cell phone. I knew the spyware on Bradley's device would automatically record and broadcast any outgoing call from my phone live, even if no one picked up. To Bradley, monitoring this, it would look exactly like I was in a panic, trying to leave an urgent, confidential message for my lawyer, Leonard Katz. I cleared my throat, intentionally constricting my diaphragm to produce the wheezing, shallow and trembling breaths of an old man suffering a massive heart attack. I hit the call button. "Leonard, it's me, Garrison." I spoke into the phone, my voice wheezing and broken with agony, exactly like a dying man. "Listen. I just drank my morning tea dose. My chest hurts, like someone smashing it with a sledgehammer. I think the heart attack is back. I'm lying on the bathroom floor at the Pierre Hotel." I deliberately paused for 5 seconds, producing a dramatic rattling cough before continuing to wheeze into the receiver. "Listen to me, Leonard. If I don't make it through tonight, you have to promise me one thing: the $80 million in the Cayman Black account. You absolutely cannot let the probate court touch it. The second layer password to release that account is the sequence 10/012/1998. It's the date of my wedding with Elizabeth. Use that sequence and wire the $80 million straight to the St. Jude Charity Fund before noon tomorrow. Don't let Bradley know." I let go, letting the phone drop onto the carpeted desk with a heavy thud, then remained completely silent for 10 seconds before disconnecting the call. In the study in the Hamptons, the moment the intercepted audio recording ended, Bradley practically flew out of his chair. His face erupted in the ultimate peak of malicious joy. He threw his hands to the sky, screaming like a fanatic who had just witnessed a miracle. The second layer password. Our wedding anniversary, December 10th, 98. The old man is lying on the hotel bathroom floor waiting to die, and he just handed us the password to unlock the treasure. The two of them hugged, dancing around my study like maniacs. They were so blinded by the glittering number of $80 million that they couldn't hear the death knell of the trap that had just snapped shut behind them. When they used the login from the red notebook and the password 10121998 to log into that system, they officially passed the point of no return. They had just directly accessed a dedicated federal honeypot account under the supreme jurisdiction of the U.S. Treasury Department. At that exact second, the static IP address of the Hamptons estate, the device identifier from the MacBook, the GPS coordinates, and the exact timestamp down to the millisecond were automatically logged into the servers of the FBI in Washington, D.C. They weren't just committing wire fraud. They had just forged a chain of severe federal felonies: unauthorized access to a secure national financial system, federal wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit international money laundering on an exceptionally massive scale. Bradley sat back down at the desk, looking supremely arrogant. He cracked his knuckles and smiled menacingly at the screen. "Goodbye, old man. Thanks for the massive inheritance." He entered the maximum transfer amount, $80, Sue. 00, inputted the destination account number at the underground bank in Nevis, and clicked Confirm Transfer. The screen showed a processing wheel for 3 seconds, then displayed a bright green text. "Transfer order received disbursement, processing in system." Monica screamed in joy, throwing herself into her husband's arms. They were absolutely convinced that $80 million was now sitting safely in their non-extradition account in Nevis. They were certain that the moment news broke of my death at the Pierre Hotel, they would officially become the newly minted billionaires, holding both the throne and the treasure of the Ford family. 3 days later, Saturday night in the Hamptons, the Long Island sky was clear, starry, and cool after days of storms. But inside my 10-acre estate, a chaotic, lavish, and deafening atmosphere was exploding so loudly it could be heard half a mile away. Bradley and Monica had decided not to bother waiting for an official death certificate from the hospital or the hotel. To them, my disappearance over the last 3 days with zero financial transactions or phone calls was absolute proof that my cold corpse was lying waiting to be discovered in a locked bathroom in Manhattan. They decided to throw a coronation party, a premature victory celebration costing $200,000, entirely booked on a secondary family credit card. I sat in a black armored limousine parked right outside the estate's main gates, alongside lawyer Leonard Katz and 2 plainclothes federal agents from the FBI and U.S. Immigration. I was wearing a bespoke charcoal black Savile Row suit, a perfectly tied silver-gray silk tie, and polished Oxford leather shoes. My silver hair was neatly combed back. There was no walking cane of a frail old man, no exhausted hunch. The arsenic in my body had been completely flushed out thanks to the intensive detox regimen. I felt brimming with vitality, as strong and razor-sharp as I was at the peak of my 40s. Through the surveillance feed on Leonard's tablet, we had a clear view of the entire scene inside the estate's main ballroom. Monica had presumptuously hired an interior design team to strip all of our family's priceless classic oil paintings off the walls, replacing them with hazy purple neon strips styled like a cheap nightclub. A massive mobile bar was erected right in the middle of the mahogany-paneled living room, where bartenders were continuously pouring expensive Dom Perignon champagne for a crowd of nearly 50 people. A long line of Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and Maybachs roared as they rolled through the iron gates. These were absolutely not my friends or business partners. These were not the corporate leaders or quiet philanthropists I usually associated with. This was Bradley's crowd of nouveau riche brats, trust fund kids who lived off allowances and had never smelled a day of hard work, fame-hungry social media leeches, and sycophants who caught the scent of money and swarmed in like flies to honey. On the screen, Bradley was standing right in the main hall welcoming guests. He was draped in my classic burgundy velvet smoking jacket, the one I had custom-tailored in London 20 years ago. The jacket was far too big for his narrow shoulders, making him look exactly like a little boy sneaking into his father's closet to play pretend. He held a snifter filled with my priceless 30-year-old Macallan single malt whiskey, laughing boisterously with a group of young men walking in. "Welcome, welcome to the new kingdom. Make yourselves at home, boys. The bar is open all night and everything is on the house." I turned up the volume on the surveillance speaker. A young guy in the group looked around and asked, "Hey Bradley, where's your old man? I thought this was your dad's mansion." Bradley took a sip of the expensive liquor, waving his hand with a smirk of ultimate arrogance. "My dad, the old man, is retired permanently. He's at a nursing home far away. So far he's never coming back to this house. As of today, I am the sole master of the Ford family, and this estate has officially changed hands." Monica glided over in a sparkling gold high-slit evening gown, wearing a $500,000 diamond necklace around her neck that I had bought at an auction as a wedding gift for my late wife, Elizabeth. The woman had absolutely no shame or hesitation wearing her dead mother-in-law's heirloom. She wrapped her arm around Bradley's waist, raising her champagne glass and shouting to the crowd dancing under the strobe lights. A toast to freedom. A toast to $80 million that just landed in paradise. The crowd below roared in applause, the electronic club music blasting at max volume, rattling every window pane in the house. Leonard Katz took off his glasses, wiped them gently with a handkerchief, and turned to look at me, his eyes gleaming with the sharp glint of an old crocodile ready to crush its prey. "It is exactly 10 p.m., Garrison. Agents from the Treasury Department and the FBI have fully secured the 10-acre perimeter. Highway checkpoints are locked down. No vehicle can leave this area without inspection. The guests have all arrived. The stage is set for your final act." I buttoned my suit jacket meticulously and stepped out to open the car door. It's time for the host to return and welcome his esteemed guests, Leonard Katz, the two federal agents, and I strode across the front lawn, bypassing the wide-open main iron gates letting cars in and out. We headed straight for the side entrance, on the right wing of the mansion. A private entrance reserved solely for the master of the house, connecting directly to the elevated stage in the main ballroom. The private security guard Bradley had hired stood at the side door and raised his hand to stop us, but the lead FBI agent simply flashed a gleaming gold badge in his face. The guard turned pale, obediently bowed his head and stepped back, his hand dropping from his radio. In the massive ballroom, the music was reaching its climax. Bradley climbed right onto the elevated DJ booth platform, holding a bottle of Macallan in one hand and a microphone in the other, screaming himself hoarse into the crowd. "Listen up, everyone. I want you all to raise your glasses to celebrate the new era of the Ford family. No more control, no more stupid rules from the old generation. This is the age of freedom and endless wealth." The crowd below clapped thunderously, cheering non-stop. Monica stood right below the platform, clapping the hardest, her slanted eyes gleaming with the pragmatic pride of someone who had just reached the pinnacle of fame and fortune. I stepped out from the shadows of the velvet curtains, standing quietly right behind Bradley on the elevated platform. I raised 2 fingers, signaling the sound technician in the control booth. Instantly, the deafening club music was cut dead in a fraction of a second. The entire massive ballroom plunged into a sudden, eerie silence. Bradley swore loudly, turning around to scold the DJ. "What idiot turned off the music? Turn it back on right now." He turned toward the DJ booth to curse, and at that exact second his line of sight slammed into me. I was standing right next to the DJ console, bathed in the spotlight meant to highlight the music platform. I stood tall, my chest puffed out, my broad shoulders as sturdy as bedrock. There was no walking cane, no helpless trembling, no confused gaze of the dementia I had been acting out for the past 6 months. I stared him dead in the face with the coldest look imaginable. The crystal glass holding the Macallan slipped right out of Bradley's fingers. It free fell onto the marble floor, shattering into 100 pieces, splashing the expensive amber liquid all over his precious velvet loafers. "Dad," Bradley stammered, his voice shrinking to the size of a mosquito's whine, his face turning as pale as if he had just seen a ghost walk back from the dead. His entire body stumbled back 2 steps, his back hitting the DJ table, his eyes wide open, darting from my healthy, flushed face to my towering posture. "Dad, why are you here? You're supposed to be. You're at the Pierre Hotel, down on the dance floor." Monica let out a blood-curdling gasp. She stumbled backward, clutching the diamond necklace around her throat, her legs trembling so violently she couldn't stand straight on her high heels. The entire crowd of guests below looked at each other in bewilderment. They couldn't understand what was happening, why the appearance of an elderly father would terrify the host of the party so much that his soul seemed to leave his body. I leisurely stepped forward on the platform, taking the wireless microphone from the dumbstruck DJ. I tapped the mic twice, the deep thump echoing through the ballroom's high-powered speaker system. "Good evening, esteemed guests." My voice rang out, clear, booming, and overflowing with the absolute authority of a former Wall Street titan, reaching every corner of the room. "I am Garrison Ford, the sole legal owner of the house you are currently standing in. I sincerely apologize for interrupting this lavish celebration. But I realized my son, Bradley, seemed to have forgotten to share a few very important details with his friends before declaring himself the new master of the family. And then, the giant projector screen on the main stage, which Bradley had previously used to run a slideshow bragging about his cars, luxury vacations, and his fabricated success, suddenly flared to life. But the image on the screen wasn't Bradley smiling on a luxury yacht. It was crystal clear, high-definition surveillance footage where you could count every strand of hair. The timestamp in the top right corner clearly read, 3 days ago, 08:14:22 a.m. The setting in the video was my familiar mahogany-paneled study. A collective gasp of horror erupted from the hundreds of guests as the sharp image displayed. Everyone here recognized that study, and everyone recognized the 2 people appearing on the big screen. The high-powered speakers Bradley had rented to blast club music were now broadcasting audio that was impeccably clear and faithful, leaving absolutely zero doubt or cover-up for the entire room to hear. This morning, I snuck in a double dose of arsenic into the old man's teapot. Your dear Dr. Thorne confirmed it. Just 3 more days, Bradley. Exactly 3 days of him drinking that tea, and his heart will stop completely. Then, the official medical conclusion will be a natural death by myocardial infarction in the elderly. No one will suspect a thing, and the $50 million family trust will be ours. Immediately following that was Bradley's shrill, ruthless laughter echoing off the marble floors. The old man spent his whole life hoarding cash. It's time that money was used to actually enjoy life. The entire ballroom exploded in shock and disgust. The elite guests shuddered, backing far away from Monica and Bradley, as if the two of them were a foul plague. Murmurs of outrage and shouted insults began rising from the crowd. Monica collapsed onto the floor, covering her face with her hands and sobbing hysterically, while Bradley stood frozen, his arms hanging limp, his face as white as a blank sheet of paper. I turned to the crowd of guests, my voice hardening with power. The video you just watched was sent directly to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of New York and the FBI exactly 3 days ago. My health is perfectly fine, and the poison these 2 individuals attempted to use failed to take my life because I have known about their plot for 6 months. I turned my face to look straight at the projector screen. Next slide. The image instantly switched. It was no longer a bank ledger. It was an official legal settlement document bearing the seal of the United States Department of the Treasury, the IRS, dated exactly 5 years ago. It was a special tax debt settlement agreement regarding a complex audit of my capital gains and international investment portfolios from my Wall Street days in the 90s. I turned back to the crowd. 5 years ago, I reached a comprehensive legal settlement with the IRS regarding a disputed international estate tax debt from the 90s. The figure locked into that settlement agreement was exactly $80 million flat. The federal agency and I jointly established an escrow account in Cayman to prepare for the liquidation of this debt-an account under the direct 24/7 supervision of the United States government. I stepped right up to Monica, looking deep into her eyes that were widening with sheer terror, her face instantly turning ash-white. That account whose information you stole, Monica. That account your husband frantically typed the security code into to drain every last cent of $80 million. It wasn't my personal savings account or a secret retirement fund. I paused a beat, the next words firing into their ears like armor-piercing rounds. It was the legal tax debt escrow holding account of the IRS. Gasps and shocked whispers erupted across the hall. A hedge fund manager standing in the back row couldn't even hold it in, bursting into loud laughter, a laugh born out of pure shock at the supreme irony of fate. When your husband clicked confirm transfer this past Wednesday night, I continued loudly, my voice ringing with authority. You didn't steal $80 million from me personally. You voluntarily used your personal authentication codes to pay my entire $80 million tax bill, straight to the U.S. Treasury Department. Bradley's lower jaw practically detached from its hinges. He glued his eyes to the IRS settlement document on the screen, then looked over at me, trying to force his paralyzed brain to process the catastrophic scale of the mistake of the century he had just made. No, impossible, that makes no sense. That's impossible. Entirely possible and flawlessly executed, son. I nodded in utter satisfaction. The reality is, at exactly 9 o'clock this morning, I received a formal email of gratitude from our family's personal tax attorney. The IRS officially approved the disbursement. My entire old tax debt has been wiped clean, and because that $80 million cash flow was initiated from an account connected to the digital identity and electronic signatures that you committed wire fraud to activate, the U.S. government currently records that transaction as an irrevocable, non-refundable voluntary payment. I strode right up to Monica, who was standing rooted to the spot. Therefore, I would like to send my deepest thanks to my precious daughter-in-law. You lusted after my wealth to the point of madness. But the result is that you just became the most generous philanthropist in the history of the Ford family, voluntarily donating $80 million to the United States national budget. You are empty-handed, completely bankrupt, and you just generously paid off every dime of debt for the rest of my life. Monica let out a spine-chilling shriek. a sound that didn't resemble a human voice, but rather the hiss of a ruptured pressure boiler. She lunged straight at Bradley, punching and kicking his chest like a maniac. "Yo, idiot! You just killed me! You told me it was a secret slush fund. You told me it was untraceable money. You just handed all that money over to the IRS, you useless piece of trash." Bradley numbly shoved his wife hard onto the stone floor, staring down at his two hands as if they were dipped in toxic acid. "I didn't know. The red notebook. The leather notebook clearly said CI Holdings. I thought it was an investment asset." I shook my head wearily. "You only read the title on the cover of the notebook, Bradley. You never had the patience to carefully read the fine print underneath. That has always been your fatal flaw for 32 years. Always lazy, sloppy, and dismissive of details." I reached into my left coat pocket, pulling out a thick stack of contracts, bound in a pale yellow hardcover. "And I have one final small announcement for the two of you." The ballroom instantly fell dead silent again. Even Monica stopped her crying and cursing, looking up at me with tear-streaked eyes full of dread. "You two constantly screamed about your ownership of this mansion." I pointed around the magnificent hall, the oak-paneled walls, the baccarat crystal chandeliers, and the Italian marble floors. "You two constantly pounded your chests, kicking everyone out of your house, proudly bragging about your inherited real estate." I spread the contract open under the spotlight. "This is a legal deed of land transfer," I announced clearly, my voice carrying. "I officially sold off this entire 10-acre Hamptons estate outright at exactly 9 o'clock this morning." Bradley's head snapped up, his eyes practically bugging out of his skull. "What? You can't. What about the family trust?" "The court. I officially initiated the dissolution of the Ford family trust 3 days ago, the exact moment I had the medical evidence and video proving you two were conspiring to poison me." I cut him off coldly. "And at 9 o'clock this morning, I finished signing the final asset liquidation papers with a Public Project Development Corporation of New York City. They are going to bulldoze this house to convert the entire waterfront property into a public eco-park and community development center for disadvantaged youth in New York State." I held the notarized paper high for hundreds of eyes to verify. "As of this morning, this land and mansion officially no longer belong to anyone bearing the name Ford. It belongs to the state of New York. This legally means that every single guest standing in this ballroom right now is merely committing a civil trespassing violation." I pointed my finger directly at Bradley and Monica trembling on the floor, but far more importantly, it means that the two of you, Bradley Ford and Monica Ford, are committing the felony of breaking and entering onto state public property right at the exact moment. Federal agents are swarming in. I looked over at the frightened guests. If I were you, I would quickly move outside in an orderly fashion. The new owner of this land is the state government, and they are extremely strict about legal liabilities regarding trespassing strangers. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, the strike that completely shattered their final fortress of pride. The cruel truth was laid bare. $80 million had vanished into the state treasury. The Hamptons mansion was sold off to be a park, and the coronation party was just a pathetic fraud. I gave a slight nod to Leonard Katz standing near the DJ booth. The old lawyer raised his phone, signaling with 2 sharp clicks of a button. The massive carved oak doors on both sides of the great hall instantly burst open. Over a dozen heavily armed FBI agents in blue tactical vests with bright yellow lettering, alongside ICE agents, stormed into the room. The sound of military boots stomping on the marble floor created an aura of total suppression. "FBI, everyone stay right where you are." "Hands in the air," a tall agent bellowed, pointing straight at the stage. "Bradley Ford and Monica Ford, you are under arrest in the act of committing multiple federal felonies." 2 agents charged up the platform, tackling Bradley down onto the marble floor without an ounce of mercy. The metallic click-clack of handcuffs locked tight around his once-pampered wrists. Another female agent approached Monica, grabbed her arm, twisted it behind her back, and cuffed her tight, ignoring her hysterical sobbing and begging on her knees for me to save her amidst the chaos of the ballroom. Leonard Katz walked slowly into the center of the room. The old lawyer looked exactly like an undertaker in his pitch-black suit, holding a thick leather-bound legal file with both hands as reverently as a priest holding a Bible before Mass. He took off his glasses, wiped them, adjusted his frames, and looked straight down at the two handcuffed criminals. "Save your breath and your voice, Mrs. Ford." Leonard's voice rang out, sharp and cold as a razor blade slicing through Monica's piercing screams. "You're going to need every ounce of that oxygen when you step into the emergency interrogation room at federal headquarters." Leonard opened the leather file. He didn't look at me. He looked straight into Bradley's face, reading in a steady, precise tone, nailing every legal term from the prosecutor's indictment. "Bradley Ford, you are officially charged with the following: 1 count of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, 1 count of conspiracy to murder a family member, 1 count of federal wire fraud exceeding $50 million, 1 count of aggravated identity theft, and 1 count of defrauding the United States government." Bradley tried to lift his head off the stone floor, his face covered in dirt and streaming with tears. "How long? How many years in prison for all of that, Mr. Katz?" Leonard didn't blink, smirking as he replied with the ruthless numbers. "The mandatory minimum sentence for federal wire fraud involving $80 million targeting a federal honeypot account is 20 years. When prosecutors tack on the charge of conspiracy to murder your own father, using a chemical poison like arsenic, which is a federal crime due to the interstate transport of hazardous chemicals, the judge will undoubtedly apply consecutive sentencing. You are facing anywhere from 25 years to life without parole, Bradley. And federal law mandates you must serve at least 85% of your total sentence before even becoming eligible for parole consideration. 25 years to life without parole." I watched that horrifying sentence slam into my son's consciousness. His eyes rolled back sluggishly toward the ceiling, his entire body going limp like a soulless corpse as the brutal reality crushed his mind. He is 32 years old today. By the time he has the chance to step through federal prison gates and see the light of freedom again, he will be an old man pushing 60, around my current age. He will have permanently lost the most vibrant years of his life. He will rot and slowly die in an iron cage exactly as I swore he would. But Monica was completely different. She didn't care about her husband's sentence. She was frantically calculating. I clearly saw the gears of scheming spinning in her slanted eyes. She thought she could cut a deal, flip the script, and dump all the blame onto my son's head. "It was all his idea," Monica suddenly roared, thrashing wildly in the female agent's grip to turn and accuse her husband. "Bradley forced me to do it. He was the one who bought the arsenic. He was the one who practiced forging the old man's signature. I'm just his wife. I was coerced. I didn't know anything about this plot to steal the money." Leonard Katz turned to look at Monica. He flashed a paper-thin smile, freezing and full of mockery. "We anticipated you would use that cheap defense, Monica. That is exactly why, over the past 3 days, my forensic investigation team conducted an extremely thorough sweep of your entire background and legal status." Leonard flipped to the next page in the leather binder. "Monica Alvarez, aka Monica Ford. You entered the United States 6 years ago on an O-1 visa for individuals with extraordinary ability in the field of fashion modeling. When your O-1 visa expired, you filed an application to adjust your lawful permanent resident status through marriage to a U.S. citizen, Bradley Ford." Monica spat, hissing, "I have a green card. I am a legal permanent resident of the United States. You have no right to touch my citizenship." "Actually, we have every right, Monica," Leonard corrected, his voice dropping a register, laden with the cruelty of immigration law. "Your green card residency right is currently still a conditional green card. It is entirely contingent upon good moral character and the transparent legality of your marriage." Monica abruptly stopped thrashing. Her entire body went rigid as if doused in ice water. "When you conspired with your husband to plan the poisoning of your father-in-law for the purpose of stealing his inheritance," Leonard continued slowly, savoring every legal syllable dropping on her head, "you committed a crime involving severe moral turpitude under the U.S. Immigration and Nationality Act. Furthermore, because you have not officially taken the oath of citizenship to become an American citizen, a criminal conviction for an aggravated felony, which conspiracy to commit murder certainly is, will automatically trigger an immediate, permanent deportation order." Deportation? Monica whispered, her lips pressed together, turning white, her voice shrinking to a pinprick. "That's right." Leonard snapped the folder shut with a sharp crack. You will not be serving your time at a standard federal prison with nice amenities, Monica. You will have to serve a sentence of roughly 15 years for your role as a co-conspirator in a maximum security detention facility. And the very second that 15-year sentence ends, you will not be stepping out onto the streets of New York. You will be escorted straight from the prison gates onto a special flight, deporting you directly back to your home country. You will permanently be stripped of your residency rights, have all your personal assets seized, and be permanently banned from entering the United States for the rest of your life. Monica let out a gut-wrenching scream, a cry carrying all the regret for her shattered dreams of lavish wealth. She dropped her knees to the floor, burying her head against the agent's legs, crying until she choked and lost her voice. But no one in this magnificent ballroom felt an ounce of pity. Hundreds of eyes looked down at the two people sprawled on the floor with utter disdain and coldness. I stepped closer, standing right next to where Bradley was handcuffed and kneeling on the marble. He looked up at me with bloodshot, tear-streaked eyes full of humiliation, begging weakly, "Dad, ask the lawyer, please, ask the lawyer to go easy on me after all. I'm your only biological son." I leaned down, looking deep into his eyes, with the unwavering resolve of a 1,000-year-old granite boulder. My only biological son died the day he decided to raise a glass to toast his father's arsenic-laced cup of tea. Bradley, you are now just a federal defendant awaiting sentencing. Good luck with your days behind prison bars. I turned my back, walking straight out the main doors of the mansion, where Rosa was waiting for me, by the sleek black Bentley under the starlight. Behind me, the agents began escorting Bradley and Monica through the gauntlet of guests, holding up their phones to record and take pictures, shoving those two greedy individuals straight into the specialized law enforcement vehicles with flashing red and blue lights. The play had concluded perfectly, and in the most ruthless way possible. 1 year later, a brilliant, warm, sun-drenched afternoon in the exclusive gated community of Coral Gables, Miami, Florida. The salty sea breeze blew gently through the lush green palm fronds, carrying the scent of frangipani and the rhythmic sound of waves from the distant bay. I sat in a woven rattan armchair on the sprawling veranda of my newly purchased Mediterranean-style villa, taking a sip of completely pure, wholesome herbal tea brewed by Rosa herself. At 70 years old, I felt more at peace and healthier than ever before. The threat of poison had faded into the past. The toxic tumors named greed had been surgically and cleanly removed from my body and my life. Across from me at the Italian marble chessboard was 7-year-old Matteo, the grandson I loved and took the most pride in. Matteo was the son of my adopted daughter, whom I had taken in from the saint. Jude Charity 20 years ago, the boy had bright, intelligent eyes and a pure, innocent soul, untainted by the pragmatism or greed of the adult generation. Grandpa Garrison. Matteo looked up from the chessboard, furrowing his brow in thought as he moved his white knight over 2 of my pawns. The other day at school, I heard my friends talking about the word inheritance. Does every kid just automatically get all their parents' money? I set my teacup down, smiling kindly at my grandson. No, Matteo. Money and assets are never a right that anyone is naturally entitled to enjoy without effort or gratitude. Parents have a responsibility to raise and educate their children to be good people. But once you are an adult, your life and your dignity must be built with your own 2 hands. I reached out and moved my queen, completely locking down the boy's left flank. If you use kindness, gratitude, and honest labor to live, this world will gift you priceless rewards. But if you use greed, deceit, or trample on the people who gave you life to steal, then even the things you think you hold tightly in your hands will turn to dust. Matteo nodded thoughtfully, and even though he didn't fully grasp every layer of deep meaning in the words of a grandfather who had survived life and death, his eyes shone with profound respect. I cast my gaze out over the sunlit garden, my heart suddenly remembering the 2 people currently serving their sentences thousands of miles away. Last week, Leonard Katz sent me the periodic report from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Bradley is currently serving his first year of a 35-year sentence at the ADX Florence Maximum Security Prison in Colorado, a place dubbed the Alcatraz of the Rockies, where inmates are kept in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day in cold concrete cells with no windows to the outside world. Meanwhile, Monica is locked up in a maximum security facility in Texas, forced to do hard manual labor day and night in the prison laundry, waiting for her 15-year sentence to end, so she can officially be escorted onto a one-way deportation flight back to South America, empty-handed and carrying a permanent felony record. I felt absolutely no regret or pang of conscience. Having survived a tragedy that nearly cost my life at the hands of my own flesh and blood, I realized that family philosophy only holds true value when respect and love are maintained in balance from both sides. Bloodline is merely a random biological connection at the start. It is absolutely not a permanent free pass, allowing anyone the right to trample your dignity, steal your assets, or threaten your life. Familial love must never be allowed to devolve into blind endurance or silent suicide. And if you loved this dramatic tale of a powerful comeback and the courage to protect one's dignity, don't forget to hit the like button, share the video, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next profound stories. Always remember, your life, your freedom, and your self-respect are priceless. Never let anyone steal them from you. Stay strong, stay sharp, and stay safe. Goodbye and see you next time.